If you're not capable of playing a hand like this, then you are lacking one of the 4 pillars of what it takes to play winning poker in 2025 in the online space. In this video, I'm going to show you what the 4 pillars are that are 100% necessary for success. You should start by making sure they are present in your game. If you don't have them, you're not going to go anywhere. So please make sure you watch this video all the way to the end, that you look at the 4 pillars, you make sure that you can do them. Let's start with pillar number 1, which is value betting. Value betting comes in lots of different shapes and sizes, but they can be categorized into thick value bets that you make for lots of money, where you try to make pots very big and get your hands worth in big blinds. The bigger your hand, the bigger you can make that pot and still be a favorite when called. That's what good poker is all about, and that's what my student does in this 50NL hand. Every hand I'm going to show you today come from a player who is beating 50NL, who with some coaching has taken his game from, promising, got some good stuff in there, good logical poker brain, into like a really strong game that I think is going to propel him through the next couple of stakes quite easily. In this hand, the student has ace-9 of clubs. Spoiler alert, we know what the villain has, but just bear with me, look at the play here. We get into a 3-bet pot with a weaker player with ace-9. You want to stretch and strain to get into more 3-bet pots, more situations where you can stack recreational players than the chart would tell you. This is obviously a 3-bet in the chart anyway, but especially in position, you want to get into more hands like this with these players because they're not very good at folding. Note here that you're 160, 170 BBs deep, which makes it even more important to be in it to win it against a recreational player. We flop 2 pair, the absolute dream, and we start not with the sort of lazy 1/3 pot, I'm the protagonist, it's all about me and my life being simple and easy and my game plan being straightforward. No, that's not what it takes to ingrain this first pillar of value betting, and in particular thick value betting, into your game. What it takes is an awareness that pot growth is exponential, and exponential pot growth is necessary when you're deeper stacked. It's vital that you get this pot growing above and beyond normal limits that would ensue if you go 3rd pot here. If you go 3rd pot here, only 14 bigs or something's going to go into the pot. The pot's going to become 37 on the turn, and it's more of a strain to get the money in. If you then pot it on the turn, you can just about get it in for a slight overbet on the river, but this will make your life so much easier. Recreational players are not renowned for being overly elastic, sensitive to your sizing on boards like this. They're going to call king jack, queen jack, king queen, ace x, 10x, 9x. They're going to call 8-7. They're going to call all these hands anyway. They're probably folding 4s anyway, no matter what you do. And if they do call one small bet with it, so what? You're not making a lot of money. This is good. You could even go bigger here. I prefer like a B70 or something, quite honestly. But the fact the student has gone B50 shows that they're thinking about this exponential pot growth idea. They're getting this pot growing nice and big. Turn sizing, really, really good. Setting it up so that the villain is quite committed, so that by river, the ace queen and stuff that's not going to fold the turn is going to just feel like it has to call a lot of the time. Your recreational opponents are cornered animals. We've talked about this before. They have a fight or flight mentality, and when pots get big, it's like a pressure cooker. They're going to burst, explode, call off the rest, jam the rest, that sort of thing. They become very volatile as you increase pot growth. I've seen so many students fail at poker because they second guess themselves. They go to the worst case scenario. They imagine that the villain has ace-10 and they just picture all the ways that they can lose. But the vast majority of a recreational player's range in this spot is just ace-x. It could be ace-4, it could be ace-3 suited that got there. It could be like 10-9 suited. It could just be ace-queen, ace-jack. It can even be ace-king, as you saw in the showdown. All in is absolutely mandatory here. So many of my students who come to me for coaching and they're like, Pete, I'm stuck. I'm stuck at 25NL, 10NL, 50NL. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I look at a hand like this and they go 3rd pot on the flop against the recreational, half pot on the turn and block the river or check the river, or just some weird fear-based play comes in. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're winning 1/3 the size of the pot that you should be winning in these situations, it's really no wonder that you're struggling. It's no wonder that you are stuck at whatever stake. So thick value betting is part and parcel of a strong game. It's a pillar of winning poker. It's not just about what you do on the river, like the final chance to bet. It's about making sure that pot grows up until that point and is as big as possible for you to put the rest in. When you're deep against recreationals, pay attention to how big you make your bets on earlier streets. It really matters to your longevity in this game. Before we move on to the second pillar, the other side of the value betting is thin value betting. Being able to eke out that bit more value from your hand at the point where it's maybe diminished by the run out, it's been degraded, it's not as good as it was, or maybe it's just a thin hand. And what you need to be conscious of here is relative hand strength. It is all about relative hand strength. We have pocket nines here. We go for the ISO. I'm going to nitpick this. I would have made this bigger. You want more money going into the pot against the recreational. You're 130 deep. You want to create that landscape where when you have a set and villain has a pair, you're setting up for all the money to go in. That's what good value betting is all about. It's about leaving the door ajar to these gigantic pots coming your way. The bigger you make the pot, the better, because if you have X% of the pot in EV and it's a good percentage and you make the pot bigger, you literally have more big blinds than EV now, and that's what you need to have, big blinds per 100, which is your win rate. 9-5 deuce the dream. We make the set, we go for half pot. I think there's maybe other lines here. You could go for check raise, perhaps. You could go for a bigger bet, could go for a smaller bet against the right sort of maniac that's going to raise you, but I would avoid that for the most part. I don't care that you block top pair here. Villain's still going to be continuing with like some pocket pairs, over cards, etc. Personally, I quite like check raising here, but I think this is fine. It is going to be somewhat harder to win a stack when you block top pair, but go for it anyway. See what you can do. You'll be surprised how stationary people can be. We go for pot on turn. I can't fault it too much. You could nitpick it. You could say, let's go for a bigger sizing. Let's go for an overbet with the blocker to top pair. I get it. Understand what we're doing here. It makes some sense. And I like the fact that we're not going really small or checking. Don't rely on your opponents at low stakes to make pots big for you. Do rely on them paying you off and getting tilted sometimes and making big mistakes, but don't rely on them to suddenly start attacking you and trying to make you fold good hands and overbet bluffing and things like that. That's not that likely to happen. Getting called down here by sevens that doesn't believe you or is tilted is much more likely to happen. Not the run out we were looking for. Any 7 gets there. That could be 6-7, 5-7 suited, ace-7 suited that floated flop, king-7 suited, 9-7 suited, it's heavily blocked. It could be pocket sevens. There's lots of hands that make straights on this river. However, your opponent has also landed here with a bunch of 5x, other pocket pairs, some form of like a6 of hearts. Villain has hands with showdown value here as well, and I really like what the student does. He goes for a block bet and he says, okay, my hand got worse, but I'm going to avoid one of the biggest traps in value betting in poker, which is to auto check without thinking when your hand gets worse. Auto checking without thinking is like a sort of recoiling defense mechanism. It's like, oh no, a bad thing happened, check. Never express your emotional state with the button on your screen. Instead, process it first. Try to become more cognizant of what's going on and only press a button after you've done a logical, conscious thought process. Love this. Getting thin value, eking out the last bits of blood from the stone. Very important skill, especially against recreationals. Pocket 10's exactly the kind of hand that, okay, we wouldn't expect it to limp call, but stranger things have happened. And then by the time villain's called the turn, this is exactly the type of hand that people forget is in their opponent's range. Really like the way we've played this. Even though we block the 9, even though it's 4 straight on river, recreationals are still very bad at folding for those pot odds with anything with showdown value. So go for it. Milk them, make these thin value bets as long as you think you've got about 60-70% equity. That's enough to make these block bets. And you can even go smaller, by the way. If you did think third pot was too thin here, you're allowed to bet 10th pot. There's no law against it. Consider it. The second pillar I want to talk about is bluffing. Bluffing in the right spots when there is excess fold equity, meaning more than you need to break even for the risk reward that you're giving yourself. You need to go ahead and find the bluff. There are 2 main types of bluffing, what I call scavenging, where you're just winning lots of small pots against unprotected ranges, identifying overfolding, identifying captness, and pouncing. Basically, you're a vulture, you're just swooping down, you're just eating up all the dead pots that people don't want. They can be heads up, they can be multi-way, and that's so healthy for your red line. It keeps you afloat, it insulates you from downswings and all sorts of other things. So with this hand, we find a really nice 3-bet here. This is a money flows to the in position player spot. The small blind gets decimated in human versus human transactions here at the poker table because they have to 4-bet the right amount, they have to call and then check raise, they have to find the right defense and bluff catches after the flop. Almost every street is overfolded in this matchup at low stakes at 50 NL. Pre-flop, flop, and turn can all be overfolded in succession, and even river on certain runouts as well. Ace deuce is a nice bluff, it's a GTO bluff, it's fine to bluff with pre, and it will overperform due to that landscape in reality. Very important. We talk about this in episode, is it 5 of Cash Injection? I don't remember, but why tripling people in 3-bet pots is so effective. We touch on this even more in Weapons of War, and Grady of the Carrot Poker School gets into the actual data on this and explains why it happens. But overfolds in 3-bet pots are an extremely important building block of bluffing at low and micro stakes, against regs in particular, but against fish in some cases too. Okay, so we go for half pot on flop here. A bigger bet strategy is good here. Smaller bet works too. You can do a lot of different things. I'm not going to critique that too much. On the turn, we have a terrible flush draw, but we don't need much to make a winning bluff in a spot like this. We're in position. If villain has a queen or a flush, they will not fold. But don't kid yourselves, guys. There's so much other stuff in villain's range. They could have floated the flop with ace, jack of hearts. They could have floated the flop with 4-5, with 7x, with 8s, with 9s, with 6s, with 5s. And if they have a queen, they might well call turn fold river here on the 3 flush turn. And if they have a flush or set, they were probably raising flop or jamming turn now, because most people at these stakes don't like to just hang around with a flush and check call, even though they should. They're going to raise off, to quote the great Hungry Horse, all of their good stuff. And so this is a fantastic river triple node. This works really, really well. The deuce of spades is a nice card to have, because although it's not a good flush draw, you're very often not against a flush draw here. When you get called on this turn, very often that will be by queen jack or ace queen or king queen or queen 10 suited or something like that. And a deuce high flush is enough to bail you out, get you to check back river and win. So this is an overfolded spot. This is a spot where there's a good amount of fold equity. You don't even need the deuce of spades here, but it's the icing on the cake. Very nice turn barrel by Hero. This is just the kind of bread and butter thing that if you're doing day in, day out, you're going to become a winning player, if you understand why you're doing it. And if you're checking because, oh no, I only have a deuce of spades, I don't like the run out, villain could have a flush. If you are this scared animal always going to the worst case scenario, you're going to really struggle because you don't have the second pillar of winning poker down. You're not bluffing enough. Another bread and butter bluff spot for you from the same student who's been playing really well recently. Very, very happy with this guy's game. Told him so in our final session, 5 out of 5 that we did. I'm currently not taking on students right now because I'm building this new course. Like, I'm really putting a lot of work into it, and I'm very busy. But if you really want coached, do shoot me an email. And if you think we're going to be the right fit, I'm being extremely selective with who I work with, I will consider it. But there's a coaching page on Carrot Corner. You can find it on the website, but you will need to make a really good case about how I can actually help you become great, because I'm being that fussy at the moment with students, with one-to-ones. We 3-bet 5-4. This is another fantastic spot to pure 3-bet. Like, okay, GTO is going to say do this sometimes, whatever. You are 100 and whatever big blinds deep against someone at 50 NL. This player has a big skill edge against all of their, not all of their opponents, but almost all of their opponents in this pool. You're in position, you're in another one of these places in the game tree where money's just going to trickle down to the in position player that's doing the aggressing. We get cold called here by a recreational, not really what we wanted to happen in the small blind. But we flop a gutter, we go ahead and c-bet half pot. Fine, no issues with this. And we have a bread and butter triple barrel spot in front of us here, ladies and gentlemen. The queen is an extremely good card for range here. This is basically a mandatory bluff. Villain mostly has 9s, 10s, and jacks, right? That's by far the bulk of their range. They might also have ace king. They'll have ace queen sometimes. They might fold that on flop to half pot or only have suited or whatever. So ace king, 9s, 10s, jacks, 7s. These are like by far the most likely hands you're going to see here. And the fold equity against that sub range by and large on the river is huge. Very good triple barrel. Awesome stuff. Great bluff. We love to see this. 9s is going to have to hero call this sometimes if villain's going to protect themselves. 10s is going to have to hero call sometimes for the same reason. You can't meet your minimum defense frequency in this spot by folding all of your underpairs, but most people fold all of their underpairs here. Sometimes you run into the odd station. It's just like, I put you on ace king and I don't believe you and blah, blah, blah. But most of the time, this is going to get through. On the river here, you know, you need 50% fold equity. You're jamming 1-to-1. You're probably getting 65% fold equity here. That's a huge deal. And in the long term, that's going to resurrect your red line from the depths of despair. And it's going to make you a winning player if you can combine it with all the other good stuff you need, the other 3 pillars. And of course, a good understanding of poker education, a logical framework, and exploitative awareness, and good mental game, and good performance, and the ability not to fall apart when you lose 6 buy-ins. Pillar number 3 is folding. The ability to fold. Being able to understand when your relative hand strength is awful because you have a bluff catcher, a hand that only beats bluffs in a spot that is underbluffed. That exploitative skill there is the number one thing that separates the wheat from the chaff when it comes to beating low stakes poker. Having the metal to fold, having the toughness to fold, the conviction, the confidence, not being so scared of not winning the pot that you call. We all know what the biggest flaw is for humans in poker, and we're absolutely kidding ourselves if we say that we don't. We've all been there. We all experience this. Nobody is unique. Nobody is immune from this. We're all human. We all make the mistake that my student doesn't make in this hand. We all fail to execute the fold that my student does execute in this hand. Ace 10 off, under the gun open, table dependent, whatever, depends who's there, pretty close to break even in theory, but I would take this spot if there's anyone weaker in the blinds. This was a recreational player in the big blind. Again here, we go for half pot on the flop. Don't hate this. There's typically a 1/3 board, whatever, 1/4 board, but I mean, half pot here is okay. Villain calls, and we get the 8 of spades on the turn. Looks like a reasonable barrel spot. I do think these kind of situations can be a bit underfolded because you almost have to pure fold a 9 here, and a lot of recreational players are not adapting enough to the textural change here. This might be a little bit underfolded, but not majorly, and this hand is just so good it can get so nutted that barreling it is obviously really good. We get raised here. That really sucks. This spot is one that requires absolute resolve, and you need to steady yourself here. You have to honestly reflect in this spot and say, what's my opponent's range? It could be a boat, like 8s, 9s, queen 9, or queen 8. That's actually quite a lot of combos. Is it something like jack 10? Probably not. Are your flush outs good? Sometimes. Are they blocked when villain has a flush? Yes. Are they dead when villain has a full house? Yes. Is this a call? Guys, I'm going to say no, because you need 30% equity here, right? 30% pot share. If the river is a spade and villain checks, okay, you'll make something. Maybe they have a bad flush. You can like make a bet. They have like a king high flush or something like that. But that's going to be really rare because their value range in part's going to block that. You need to improve the win here, right? You're not going to do well calling this and then bluffing if they check, even though in theory you should do really well on that node. You're not going to do well in reality with that line. This is basically a mining spot, and I don't think we're getting 30% pot entitlement. The student needs to find a fold here. Their first misstep, though, in the hands that we've chosen, and very understandable, because this just doesn't look like a fold. It looks like a call. You have the nut flush draw, you're in position, you have a straight draw, but if you're hand reading honestly, if you're actually not bullshitting yourself, you can find the fold here because this is just value, basically. At 50 NL, when a recreational player raises you fairly large on a 3 straight, 3 flush turn, you're in big trouble. And redraw that's not nutted is not going to cut it for 30% required. Implied odds aren't that high. Reverse implied odds are, as we're about to see. The spade gets there. How are we feeling? How are we feeling on the spade? Not thrilled, right? Villain checks and we go for pot. I get it. We got a bit of a green light. But how many combos of worse flushes are there here? Remember, jack 10 of spades is a straight flush, so that's out. King 5, king 4, king 3, king deuce, king 6, king 10, king jack, 7 of those, jack 6 suited, 4, 5, 5, 6 is a straight flush. I don't know, there's like 10, 11 worse flushes in this node, something like that. And are they going to call this? Maybe, depends on the recreational player, but my instinct is that this is a bit big. Part of our thinking here should be about saving money if we get jammed on, because this is a spot where we do lose to boats still, and boats might play this way sometimes. I do expect them to usually just bomb the hell out of the river, but they might go for like the trap here sometimes. It makes sense. So I think the river plays a bit big here. I think we've overvalued our hand on turn and river. We should have got away from this earlier, but this is really, really hard for a 50 NL player to get away from. But now, the pot odds are so good. Villain goes all in. It's another 64 to us. Sorry, I know you can't see the stack there, but it's the rest of our stack, right? 64 big blinds. We need 20% required equity roughly now. How can we fold? We have the nut flush. We can fold because we're always dead. That's why we can fold. We can fold because we are losing every single time in this spot. That's why we can fold. So you can lament and you can justify the saboteur thought process inside your mind that goes, you can't fold the nut flush. That whinging, sniveling little child inside your brain that will not just let you do the mature, proper adult thing that's good for your poker career. You can justify and feed that little brat if you want, but it's just going to keep you stuck in the doldrums of low and micro stakes poker. This fold is noble. It's very required. I think it's obvious, but it's extremely difficult to actually do in game. With 11 seconds on the clock, with your brain going haywire, screaming at you that everything's wrong, that you messed up earlier, you should have folded turn, you shouldn't have bet that big on river, you hate yourself, it's so easy just to be like, I call. I throw the rest of the cake on the floor because a bit fell off my plate. Good fold though. Should have folded earlier. Difficult one. I have sympathy for this. Turn fold would have been the fold of a lion. Final pillar of winning poker is polarization. Understanding how polarization works. Grade 2, lecture 2 is, in my opinion, the wrong lecture for that topic. Grade 2, lecture 1 is, in my opinion, one of the best things I've ever made. It was the first lecture I ever created in the Carrot Poker School that you can check out at carrotcorner.com. Use code PILLARS for 20% off if you do pick up Carrot Poker School, Golden Carrot, any of our stuff today. If you do decide it's time to embark on that formal education, use code PILLARS for 20% off at checkout. Okay, polarization is something that I want to actually teach you via the dreaded sim. That's right, I'm going to pull up a sim and show you exactly how this works. So let's go on a journey through the game tree together. I'll show you how you can use GTO Wizard in this respect. I do have the full subscription. I'm going to use the node locking custom AI stuff because it's just way, way better, but I'll show you how that works. We are going to look at button big blind here to illustrate polarization on the river from big blind's point of view. I've got the idea of the spot I want to set up in mind here. So it's going to be big blind calls a button open. We're going to solve post flop with AI. We're going to create solution. We're not going to bother about the details. We can change this later. We're going to make some board, Jack 8-6, and we're going to ask button player to play, I don't know, let's just get them to play like a lot of you guys play, right? A lot of you guys are going to be playing a small c-bet here. I don't recommend that necessarily because people are very used to facing it. I recommend B200 on most low boards that are not going to equalize nut advantage much. And I'm building a course around how that whole game tree of checking back a lot on the flop works. It's in the lab right now. It's going to be a long time. It's going to be the biggest course I've ever made. It's going to be absolutely huge. But anyway, I don't want to rant about that too much. Let's say that we go for a bet on the flop and big blind is going to call and the turn comes a deuce of clubs, a brick, and it goes check, check, and big blind lands on the river. This is where I want to illustrate how polarization works. So big blind checks, button has the chance to overbet or check here. This is a pretty normal overbet node, 15.6 into a pot of 7.5, 2x pot it's going for, but let's say that button checks this time and the river comes the 4 of spades. Some straight draws get there, not too many, some two pair gets made, that kind of thing. Big blind, we're going to give them a river toolkit of block, of B75, and of overbetting. Good old Carrot Poker School vanilla sizes here. And I want to show you how big blind's range separates itself into groups based on polarization. This is a really beautiful thing. Polarization is the essence of the game. If you can grasp it, it will make you a good poker player. So bear with me here, even if this gets a little bit technical. So big blind has a range advantage here because they filtered the flop. They called the flop bet. That propels their range overall above buttons. They also do well in the nut department because they're not capped here. Button is very likely to have bet a set, to have bet two pair, to have bet an overpair, to have bet a straight draw on the turn for the most part. So things like 7-5, for example, are going to be more in the big blind's range than buttons, although they will raise that on the flop sometimes. But yeah, they're going to have a region here that can go for the B150. That's the purple color, right? So when you're looking at hands like Queen Jack, that hand, because of relative hand strength, because of the sheer capness of the buttons range, this hand in big blind's range is very powerful. It's an extremely polar hand, meaning it's on one end of the polar spectrum. So a polar hand is one that either has a lot of equity or not very much equity at all, like a bluff or something really powerful. Where people make polarization errors, they bet too much with hands in the middle. They turn them into bluffs when they should be showing down, or they value bet them when it's too thin. But another type of error surrounding polarization that you could make is if you fail to realize how polar your hand is in the spot because you're not well versed in relative hand strength in that spot. Very many people don't understand that Jack 10 or Queen Jack or King Jack or whatever is a nutted hand here, or they don't understand that like a very polarized way to play fours is to check raise very big. Fours blocks a 4. It unblocks hands that villain will thin value bet or even thick value bet like top pair and their bluffing range as well. And so it goes with the check raise here. We cover that in grade 2 lecture 5, by the way, these sort of hyperpolar ways of playing hands where we start with a check and then we go for a giant raise. That's what Silver's doing with fours here. But to talk about the polar spectrum here, in purple, the B150 range, it goes all the way down to like a kind of mediocre Jack 10, good to mediocre top pair. Then you have less polarized hands at B75, that's the pink color. Something like pocket tens, a weak Jack, still hands with a lot of equity. If you look at the equity of those hands, it's probably in the 80s. I would imagine in this node, if we change EV to equity here, and we look at like a bad Jack, yeah, it's like in the high 80s, it's like 88% for Jack 3, even 10s is over 80%. Hands with over 80% equity can typically go for these B75 type sizes, like your classic big bet. Then you have less polar hands still that are still value bets. The orange color is your block bet, it's your 1/3 pot, and you can see that second pair is always doing that basically. The thing about a hand like Queen 8 here is that you're going to block a lot of your opponent's bluffs with this queen. So checking and hoping that they bluff is not such a good idea. In practice, people are going to be paying off block bets with all kinds of under pairs, all kinds of 6x, all kinds of river 4x, ace high, and going for the block there with Queen 8 is a really good thing to do. Another type of error people make is that they just check when a hand looks meh, like it looks kind of good but not that good. They don't consider the block bet, and they're underestimating the hand strength of an 8 in this spot, and it's another type of mistake about polarization because they think the hand's more dipolar, more middling than it actually is. Then you have a checking range, pocket 7s down, pocket 5s, etc. You're not going to be betting those hands, you're just showing them down. Good ace-x is the same. And then below that, when your hand begins to lack showdown value, trace this range all the way down to Queen 10, which is the first hand that is lacking the showdown value to just need to always bluff. This hand has to go for it. Back to pillar number 2 for a second. This is an excess fold equity spot in theory. It's a spot where if you bet the Queen 10, you will get excess fold equity for any sizing because you have a range advantage here. So this fold number is always more than it needs to be for you to break even. For B33, you need 25% folds to break even. They fold 32%. For B75, you need 43, they fold 50. And for B150, you need 60, they fold 66. So all sizes are winning to bluff with here. And once your hand lacks the depolarization to check, once it becomes a polar hand in the air, you need to go ahead and bluff it. Look at the sim for a while, pause the video, just stare at it. Let the idea of this spectrum of hands with different roles depending on their polarization seep into your brain, understand how it works, and just sit and stare at the screen with me pause making this face. Hope you enjoyed having me on your screen for a while doing that. I thought it was a good pose. Hope this has been a useful one. Head on over to Carrot Corner if you have decided that it's time to take the plunge and start your formal poker education, structured homework tasks, many videos. Yeah, Golden Carrot's the best value thing for that. Remember the code. Do use this week's code if you're picking anything up at Carrot Corner. And the code is, of course, Pillars. Code Pillars for 20% off. And I'll be back with more content next week. And do check out the live streams as well. We are live streaming quite a lot. It's called Crush 100 NL. I try and bring my A game, show you how to beat that stake. Hope you're liking those too. Stay tuned for them. Maybe click the live tab if you want to see some recent shows and watch those after the video as well. All right, guys. Catch you later. Bye for now.